So our next speaker is Scott Nyquist, who is with McKinsey, and he's based here in Houston. And Scott, we've had some pretty interesting discussions about Houston. They've done a lot of work on cities all over the world, and also specifically on Houston. And we have the first.
For those of you who don't know McKinsey, we are a management consultancy firm. We serve mainly Fortune 500 companies around the world on topics of strategy, where do you invest your capital, how do you win against competitors, how do you organize yourself, and how do you improve your operations. We do quite a bit of work in the public sector for cities and state and federal governments. And we also have a think tank that does research on topics of interest to our clients. And what I'll do today is look across the work we've done in our think tank, as well as work with some of our private sector clients and public sector work, and just offer some ideas on what we've learned in that work on the topic of sustainability in cities. Any luck? So while he's working on that, I'll just describe, I had three messages. One, I think David mentioned some of this a bit already, which is when we look at the global challenge of sustainability, we have found that cities are at the heart of it. Oh, very good. And there's this massive urbanization going on around the world, particularly in developing countries. And if we can get these cities designed in the right way, we can move toward a much more sustainable future. Second point is, and David asked me to put this into the room, is that when I look at the work we've done for cities around the world, we have found that if we focus on those areas where you can generate attractive economic returns on investment while building a more sustainable environment and while supporting social goods, and you prioritize your efforts on those areas, that's where you can get the most alignment and practical action. So we found ourselves in our work around the world trying to highlight those areas of opportunity and getting after them first. And we have found that there are 7 industry sectors or 7 areas where we find most of these opportunities. I'll give you some examples of them. But we found opportunities in how you build buildings, what you do with transportation, water systems, waste systems, power generation, land use, and industrial manufacturing operations. So I'll highlight some of those in the presentation. Just go through quickly, since David highlighted some of this already. We've now hit a state in which half the world's population lives in cities. The U.S. has somewhere around 80% in cities, but in developing countries, but particularly subsistence living in the rural environment, we now, through this massive urbanization, have half the population in cities. China is building 2.5 Chicagos every year. India, almost 1 Chicago every year, and an extraordinary kind of revolution happening. And going forward, we expect the urban population to even double by 2050. So this is the big mega trend of our time, at least from a demographic point of view. And from our private sector clients' point of view, this is where the money is. This is the growth. 80% of GDP growth is happening in cities, 80% of total GDP. If you're a consumer products company, if you're an electronics company, cities are your most important marketplace. In fact, some 600 cities around the world will consume 60% of global GDP. So this is where the action is, and this is where the thinking is going in terms of people marketing their products. And then from a sustainability point of view, this is also where all the environmental issues are. 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to demand in cities, 75% of energy consumption, 70% of resources such as metals and materials and food are consumed in cities. So if we can crack the code on sustainability in cities, we'll make a huge step forward on dealing with the global issues on the planet. So this is a framework that we have evolved to using when we work with folks that are trying to do regional planning around cities. And it's based on the premise that if you look at starting point, what are the opportunities to grow your economy? Where are the areas that you have great strengths in your economy that you want to build on? And identify those. Identify what are the big environmental issues that you face in your community, and what are the opportunities for social progress. And then if you look at the intersection of all those areas, those are the ones where you can build alignment in the community to actually support economic growth and deal with environmental issues. we found that there are many, many opportunities that overlap these three areas. Let me just describe the highlights in 7 key sectors where we've found opportunities. First is in buildings. It's just an enormous opportunity to create economic value, reduce energy consumption, and in a very effective way. And if you are a private sector company, you can sell new lighting systems, air conditioning systems, control systems that will enable buildings to be more efficient. If you're a city, you want to put in incentives, standards, permitting to encourage the development of buildings. This creates a huge benefit in terms of a better environment. Transportation. David mentioned some of the opportunities on reducing congestion. IBM has lots of good ideas on that. We've seen it in many parts of the world, a big opportunity. But also thinking through at a strategic level of how you're going to develop your transportation infrastructure such that you can put in the foundations now that will meet the needs of the future structure of the city going forward. Huge opportunities to do that. I think Houston has opportunities in that area. Water and waste. Many parts of the world there is water shortages. Big opportunities put incentives to reduce water consumption. Many water utilities are poorly managed. Big opportunities to increase efficiency. Houston's not so bad in this area, but big opportunities in other parts of the world. Waste. This is an opportunity for Houston. But we're finding that there are countries like Germany, many cities in Germany, San Francisco, where they're pushing very aggressively to get recycling rates effectively to almost zero waste in a landfill. Huge opportunity for us to do more in Houston on that topic. Power generation, utilities. How can you create a generation fleet that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions? And then from the city point of view, how can you make purchase decisions that are consistent with a sustainable environment strategy? And then going forward, as distributed energy becomes more economic, we estimate that solar will become attractive on its own in the next 3 to 5 years. How do you facilitate development of solar applications as they become more economic in the urban environment? Land use, big opportunity here. We're finding that in these cities where you're doing a greenfield site, it's a very interesting problem. If you get selected to be the new mayor of a city in China that hasn't been built yet, it's going to be as big as New York. How do you design it? Middle East trying to build zero energy cities, thinking through how the land gets structured and used there, a big opportunity. But in cities that are already being developed, there are also opportunities to think through how you put in green space, and we find both private and public sector entities thinking through about what's the right way to space parks and industrial complexes in a way that makes a city very livable. And then finally, on industry, huge opportunities to use resources more efficiently. This has been an area that we found many of our private sector clients just haven't looked at over the past years, where they grew up with low energy and water prices. Now they're finding opportunities to reduce energy consumption and reducing water consumption and other materials consumption. And again, cities can play a role in this, and just by sharing information, putting in incentives to drive industry to operate in a more efficient way. So these are just 7 areas, and again, McKinsey's done work around some 50 cities on, and when I look across all of them, these are the topics that come up time and time again as opportunities to drive a more sustainable city. I wanted to just spend a couple minutes just describing New York as an example, just to give you a flavor of what another city did. This is a story where Mayor Bloomberg in 2002-2003 timeframe put together a team to go look at how do we build a more sustainable New York. And he put up, or the team put up these broad objectives. They wanted to make New York more economically vital. They wanted to do actions on sustainability that would support attracting more industry. There were some very specific environmental concerns, including greenhouse gas emissions. That was a big topic for Mayor Bloomberg at that time. And livability, making the city a more attractive place for its residents, more green spaces, more responsive fire and police. So this was their definition of sustainability as they set out on their kind of planning exercise. And then I just described on one kind of subtopic, which was what they did on power generation. This is called Plan New York. And they had an aspiration to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. And just describe the methodology to give you a sense for the thinking process they went through. They first quantified what happens if we just keep going on business as usual? And surprise, surprise, they found that demand would go up, prices would go up, and the total cost of power would be $2 billion more per year in New York in 2030 than it is today. So that was the starting point on the facts of the current problem. Then they looked on the supply side, and they found that the various rules, regulations, and behaviors of utilities had created this very nice oligopoly of the power supply market, where they're quite happy not to build more plants, and the city was stopping them from building more plants. Therefore, they had some very kind of dirty generation facilities. And this convolution of the utilities quite happy to have high prices, and the city unable to kind of get its act together to change permitting to fix it, led to a untenable environment going forward. Similarly, on the demand side, they found all kinds of reasons why they were consuming electric power very inefficiently. There are lots of barriers to making efficiency applied, and the team identified all kinds of techniques to break through that. And what I found was interesting, the specifics are less interesting than the categories, and I've seen similar results when you've done this kind of work around the world, on particularly power generation, is that you usually find a group of things you can do on the supply side. What can you do to encourage generators to build more environmentally friendly facilities? There are ways the city can play a role in that. Huge opportunities on the demand side. If you break power consumption into different segments, in the case of New York, they broke into 6 different segments, and think through specifically what can be done to encourage efficiency in those areas, you can get through some very tangible actions that can help facilitate improved efficiency. And then there is also this topic of regulatory and organization issues that have come up. And I don't know all the details, but there were some specific laws that were in place that enabled the power generators to keep out new competitors from coming in. There were some barriers to efficiency that were kind of rooted in laws that were well-intentioned at the time when they were put in place 30 years ago, but it was actually blocking progress. It turned out that the city of New York didn't really have a citywide energy planning commission, and they were relying on the state. Well, the state had different agendas than the city, and by putting together a coherent planning thing, they could actually do battle with the state and get the interest of the New York City made against the state. Also put in organizations to think about how you manage demand. So these are the kinds of things that will come out as you go through the fact base, looking at where is the opportunity to create economic value. You'll find these organization, legal, regulatory bottlenecks that can be addressed. And if you put the facts on the table, at least sometimes you can break through them. Oftentimes the politics will let you do it, but at least you can have a structured debate. So that's a New York story, and I just leave this framework as this is just more of the analytic framework for how we do this. I just put this one out there as you all think about how you approach the problem. But one is just make sure you start with a fact base. Everybody has opinions on all these issues, but to get a basic grounding in terms of what are the current and potential programs, what's the economics of the different opportunities, how do you compare against other cities, and make the debate rooted in facts. Second of all, on the left is create a process where you involve the key constituents in the community. It's never easy to do this, but you can create a structured approach where you have meetings at certain times involving different players that will enable people to observe the facts and help to build alignment around the conclusions. And then at the end, you need to focus on concrete, tangible actions. This is the part where people tend to fall down. They'll send out platitudes that are unactionable. And you need to have targets that you're aspiring to, but you need to have steps that you can take that will make progress. And sometimes little steps are much better than big ideas. So that was just the framework that we've been using. Now, I asked our guys who do this kind of work just to list, and I won't go through all of them, but if they were looking at Houston, what might be some targets or aspirations for Houston? And it was interesting just to hear them talk about Houston as an outsider. And from their point of view, they think of Houston as kind of a middle-of-the-road U.S. city on sustainability. It's not a complete debacle, but it could be better. And they said, well, lots of opportunities for Houston to do more in buildings. Some good progress on LEED, but not particularly great reputation for having efficient buildings. What more can be done? Public transport, not such a good reputation in terms of compared to other cities. A lot more that can be done there. So how do you kind of can make that happen? Power generation was not so bad. A lot of gas use, and if you compare to other cities in the U.S. that are have relied on coal or coal use in China. We're not so bad there. And the question is, how do you take advantage of renewable energy as it comes into, becomes more economic in the future? People get very excited when they look at Houston as the opportunity of what can be done on land use. Because Houston's a large area, if we could get the structure of how we use our land in the future right now, by the time 2050 comes around, we could have created something spectacular. And the decisions we make now on how we use land will affect the city for generations, and now we have the opportunity, what can be done on it. The clean air, I'm sure others will know more about this than I do, but it certainly looks from an outsider that we don't have a good clean air program here in our region. What can we do to get that sorted? Water is viewed as, Houston seems to have its act together in terms of reasonable water use and efficient utility, but there is this flood issue that comes up from time to time. And then finally, on the recycling area, Houston has relatively low recycling and a big opportunity to, over the next generation, to move toward zero waste in landfill. What steps can we take now to begin to head down that direction? So anyway, just some thought starters, ideas. So summarize the main messages. If you're worried about sustainability, cities are where the action is. If you're in the planning business, think through developing a concrete set of tangible actions that can be executed, and rather than a long list of platitudes. And then there's these 7 sectors where we found the best opportunities to make practical action. Let me stop there.